Hello, everyone, and welcome. Oh, no, let's not do that. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, November 15th, and here we are in week 4. We've made it all the way to the end of the month. It always seems to come up pretty quickly as you work on all of your assignments, and you are at the peak currently of all of, or at least on Sunday, you were at the peak of the class where you were turning in your Palace of Orinthalian composition. You were turning in your week 2 revisions. You had worked on your orchestral template, got that set up, got the basic structure, and did the final touches to the game composition. And we're creating all of the elements moving forward for the class. And here in week 4, things lighten up a bit as we do not have a brand new game composition like we've had in our previous weeks. Where this week we are focused on how do we take the projects that we've worked on, finish them out, and create a final version of everything, create a final game capture that you can share. By now, here we are at the end of the month, you have 3 different game projects that have your custom music and sound effects in them. And the games are working Mac games. Hopefully you've had success throughout the month getting your music and sound effects working in the game, getting the video captures up and working. And if you're having any of those sorts of technical issues at this point, please get in contact with me and we can certainly figure all of those technical issues out. But you now have working Mac applications, and they are for you to add to a demo reel, to a portfolio, to change and update and use in any sort of format that you want. And they're all well and good as Mac applications, but having video captures, quick and succinct video captures that show off music and sounds that demonstrate how everything works together, how your audio interfaces with the game. Those types of things are going to probably last you a bit longer than the game itself because as computers change and operating systems change and applications change, especially in the Apple environment, the operating systems are constantly updating. There is really no guarantee that a year or 5 or 10 years from now that this application is still going to work in the same way. But if you do a video capture, having a video itself, the actual probably QuickTime movie file, and having maybe a YouTube link will probably last a lot longer and allows you to show off exactly what you want to demo. So we will be talking about creating the final demo video captures for each of your games. We will basically be focused on how do you take everything that you've worked on through the month, the knowledge that you've learned, the topics that we've discussed, and apply them beyond the month. How do you get started in the industry? How do you find clients? How do you find employers? Hopefully, one of the big focuses of this class is really to introduce you to this side of the industry, to show you what it's like as a music composer to work on a game project, to give you a sense of the type of work it is and the industry as a whole. And some people are really going to be drawn to it, and other folks are kind of say, okay, well, if that comes along, maybe that's not the type of work that I want to be involved in, and gets basically just an overview of the industry. And hopefully the intention is really to show you that there's a lot of opportunity over in the game industry, and there's also your music is just as applicable and viable in the games industry as it is in all these other formats. So Our week 4 kind of heads in that direction. How do you get started? How do you find a job? How do you find clients to work with and projects to get involved with? And then we have our last round of assignments to discuss. And so you have turned in your week 3 Palace of Renthalion composition. We have 8 submissions to take a listen to. Notice that I have them stacked vertically this time, as opposed to each one of our previous peer review. Each student had their own track, and all of their tracks were horizontally laid out. But in a vertical music system like Palace of Renthalion, you have the ability to fade up and down any one of these pieces of music at any time. And so we will take a listen to all of these. We'll start out with Palace of Renthalion, and then we will get back into the new assignments for week 3. Well, no, we wanted week 4. Hold on, looks like I opened the wrong ones. Let's try that again. We're not in week 3 anymore. We are in week 4, and we need the slides. How about that? That will probably work a bit better overall. Week 4 assignments. There we go. All right, so we have 4 tracks: Earth, Fire, Water, and Wind. And we have all 4 of our cues laid vertically out on those tracks. And we will go through and listen to them one at a time. And we are listening for one of the most core elements of this composition is how they blend and how they play together. Because in the game, you have the possibility of any 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these playing simultaneously in any sort of combination, and really turning on and off at different or at any time. So you need to make sure that consistently throughout your 16 or 32 bar loop that they musically make sense. They're harmonically, melodically, rhythmically. They do not clash. There's not any sort of dissonance in the pitches, any sort of clashing rhythms, and we will listen to them in as many kind of combinations as needed. Then individually, we need to make sure that there's enough instrumentation per cue. You need to be using at least 3 or 4 instruments that hopefully represent instruments in the lower range, maybe some lower percussion or lower brass or strings, mid-range for most of your harmonic instrumentation, and a higher range or register for your melodies. Each cue is going to need to have its own strong melodic voice, its own character to it, which means unique instrumentation from one cue to the next. So they need to make sense when they're played together. So there's a couple of common similarities that they need to have, common properties that they will all follow to make sure that they make sense, at least harmonically and probably also rhythmically and melodically. So they all need to start at the same time. They need to end at the same time, and they are going to be either 16 bars or 32 bars. That means they can loop together at the same rhythm and the same tempo, same time signature, so that they rhythmically make sense. You have each cue needs to follow a similar chord progression, a common set of chords that they can all pull from. Now, each cue doesn't need all first, third, fifth, or seventh voice of the chord. You can use different voices of the chord across the multiple different cues, so that the full voicing of the chord is not revealed until you hear 3 or 4 of the cues. What other common elements? Same key, same chord progression. So there's so many common elements that the things that you are going to be different, if there's going to be so much that's the same, the things that we need to focus on that are different are your choice of melody. Each melody, like I said, is going to have, each cue is going to have its own strong melodic voice given to it by the composition of the melody, your choice of instrument that holds that melody, and then the rest of your choice of instruments. The earth cue represents the hero and the hero's journey. It's probably played by characters that actually might be modeled or animated into the game. So a small group of musicians, local town entertainers or bards that will be small handheld percussion, lutes and harps and small plucked strings, light woodwinds could certainly work. Flutes, strong melodies from a flute could work. The fire cue is probably going to be your full orchestra, full ensembles, brass ensembles, string ensembles. Use the power of the full orchestra. The water cue is going to be an emotional cue, so it's going to be much lighter instrumentation overall, strong emotional lead melody. I've heard harps and harpsichords, pianos, choirs, more woodwinds work well there. The wind cue can be certainly elements of woodwinds, bassoons, contrabassoons, oboes, woodwinds and lower ranges work. Maybe some low brass, low strings. This wind cue represents stealth, danger, the enemy. It's certainly not the battle at that point, but a much more tense, uneasy tone to it overall. So those are a lot of the things that we are listening for. Just looking at all of these, most of them seem like they are set up, ready to go for the game. These are all the same length. These cues are all the same length. These are all the same length. All good through those. Level-wise, we want to pay attention. These cues, all 4 of these, need to be cut down. Looks like the music's actually the same length, but the files are not. So we want to watch out if the files are different lengths. So watch the edits of those. And then the levels, we want to make sure that, let's see, make sure that this is not broadcast. All right, this level, is it gonna, how can I, whatever. You want to make sure that the faders go up to you in the game. When you turn on a piece of music, all the music, the level or the volume of the music does is go from negative infinity up to unity. So when these 4 faders are at unity, that is going to be the overall level going out of your master. And I'm going to turn this up a bit. Very quickly it gets very, very loud and will go and distort and overload the output here. So you want to, it's going to do the same thing in the game. So you want to avoid that. All of these look at a more appropriate level. So we'll see when we're combined. These look like they're a bit too loud overall, but they're going to loop properly. These might be a bit loud also, but we will actually take a listen to it as we go. All right, let's start at the first one over here. Hopefully you see I have the markers up here. And when I minimize this down, you can still see them, so you know where yours lines up there. Let's get headphones on. All right, we'll start at the first fire cue. So here's some good amount of woodwinds in there. Big percussion and some strings panned over on the right side. The percussion I think is a bit too big. There's a low drum in there, almost sounds like a kick drum that hits a bit too often overall, so maybe smaller handheld percussion, less cymbals. Lighten up there because that would probably be more appropriate through the fire cue. Watch for the repetition of the or take one of those instruments and bring it forward as the lead in the mix. Let's jump over to the wind cue. Same thing with the repetition. Take that lead string line and use it as the melody throughout the cue. The instrumentation works. Although I wouldn't just have strings. Sometimes I hear one cue just has brass, one has just woodwinds, one has just strings. So you want to make a mixture. Fire cue. The cellos and the low brass works. The flute feels kind of out of place, especially in the repetition, and you need big drums, big percussion, big timpanis, marching snares, just kind of big snare patterns, bring the crashes and the cymbals from the earth cue. Yeah, if this was more, this pattern here in the earth cue, if that was more timpanis and snare drums, could work well in the fire cue. Work more on developing melody instead of the repetition. Use quantization to tighten up the notes. Maybe often taking the MIDI information, MIDI notes, and sliding them a slight bit ahead of the actual beat will allow them to hit at the right time and kind of tighten up the overall rhythm. There is some kind of clutter in there, whether it's I think it's some of the tones. There are some clashing notes in there that you want to watch out for. All right, let's reset here and go back to earth cue. A little sparse overall. Needs a couple more instrument layers. Percussion. Maybe a trumpet or a guitar line. Some other harmonic instrument to support the winds here. Let's go to the wind cue. Oh, watch that loop. That was a pretty strong pop when it looped around. Again, watch out for just having strings in one cue. It only sounds like you have about 2 instruments in each cue so far. The fire cue needs more power, needs more brass. This is a good layer so far. More needs percussion, strings, more instrument layers in each cue. The water cue. Some of this could work well with a fire cue. All the brass seems kind of reserved, like at a lower velocity, needs to have more brightness. If it is at a lower velocity, either push that up or maybe it's another patch. All right, let's bring it all together. Yeah, watch the pops when it loops around. The earth, fire, and water work well together. There's some elements of the strings and the winds that clash against the three other cues. So I would work on the clarity of each of the lines so that you can start making more room to add more instrumentation per cue. All right. Next. So I hear some sort of guitar or lute, tambourine, strings. So far it sets up a good bass. I guess the melody comes from the guitar line. Maybe it could be doubled with some woodwind. Let's see where it goes. I like the little march from the snare. Some of the lower woodwinds. Sounds like a oboe bassoon. Those layers work well. Fire. Okay, so the snares do not clash with each other against the fire and the wind. Everything is, with quantization, everything is tight around the beat, or at least tight enough overall. The only thing that I kind of hear in this fire cue is that the brass stabs are a little short. Could lengthen that note out on each one of those brass stabs, but that's just really kind of a smaller point. There's just feels like there's a gap in between those that could kind of be glossed over. Excellent. Solid melodic line there. Couple of wind layers. all together, the melodies work quite well. The only thing that I'm hearing is the time signature feels 6/8, and if counted in 6/8, I count 8 bars as opposed to 16 bars. 2, 3, 2, 5, 6, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if it's 3/4 versus 6/8. Depends on how you are counting everything, but could definitely use another half if you wanted to extend that out. And this always becomes a challenge because the composer sets the tempo and the time signature. You determine what it is, like how it's being counted. And it comes down to how the musicians would interpret it overall, just where the back of the rhythm is, because then when we get into how many bars things are going to be and how it fits in the game, the difference between 6/8 and 3/4 is twice the length of the cue. So making it all fit, and it often becomes a discussion of how things are counted, or how it's basically interpreted. But excellent job. Everything fits well together. Nothing really, certainly nothing clashes. Nothing also sticks out in the mix. Everything kind of glues together, and the harmonies and the melodies kind of play off of each other and give a little bit of room to breathe. So let's check out the next one here. I would watch out for having the percussion in the second half. There's a low drum here in the first part. Watch out because it certainly gets cut off at the end. Having it only in the second half makes it a bit more obvious as to where the loops are, or where the different parts of, or the fact that you are in a loop, because you can recognize where the percussion is and where it's not. So I would use it more consistently throughout, but I would say this percussion is a bit too large for this cue, so move it over to bongos or congos or other smaller handheld percussion, shakers, tambourines, things like that. The piano also, I would say, is a bit too big. Again, I imagine this as a small group of musicians who are moving and are holding their instruments, so they're not probably pushing a piano out in the middle of the street to perform. So lighter, smaller instrumentation through here. The flute works just fine as the melody, like that part. Wind cue. Probably a bit too low in the mix, needs to come up a bit more to compete. The lead line can come up also as a focus. Some of that percussion is a bit too loud overall in the mix, and also balance it against something on the higher register that even kind of balances out that melody. Fire. So you can probably bring all of that big percussion, big cymbals, crashes, timpanis, all of that stuff can be brought to the fire cue and used constantly throughout. But there does seem to be some big gaps between the brass. It'll hit, or there'll be a stab, and then it'll kind of pull away, and there's a gap, like that. So we'll create something that is consistently driving underneath, whether it's an ostinato string line or some other constant pulse of another brass layer. And the water loop. Watch the loop overall, but the instrumentation works well. String line, lead melody. This one fits the overall theme well. Let's bring them in together. There seems to be a low bass drum that exists in multiple cues. Actually, when I bring all these in together, you can see everything kind of bounce. I mean, it certainly could be the pulse of the music also, but just double check that there's not a bass drum or any instrumentation that's repeated multiple times in the cue. Everything fits well together, everything kind of moves together. You should focus on individual melody lines in the cues and just some of the instrumentation details through that. Okay. Try the next one here. Alright, the woodwinds work well to kind of support that plucked string. I'm going to guess that's a guitar of some sort. I would actually like to hear maybe more of a chord or strum with slightly offset MIDI notes instead of the individual plucks. Maybe at least just some intervals, some harmonies to play against. The little bit of percussion and the little bit of woodwinds in the background support it well. I think the pluck of this harp in the wind kind of gets lost against the plucked guitar of the earth cue. So you might want to find a different instrument for the wind. Everything loops well. Percussion works nicely. brass works well. The lead melody could be a bit brighter, a bit more up front. Yeah, all that stuff can just be pushed forward a bit more. Oh, oops, that one works well. Yeah, the leads maybe a bit too much in reverb. Just kind of glosses over the notes overall. But the strings work nicely. Maybe a choir to kind of help with those strings could work also. And I think that these are all going to fit together. Yeah, the brass of the fire cue works well. All right, good work. All right. Careful of this first earth cue. Actually, let me return it back here to its original state. Oh, no, I don't want to go back that far. Keep my track's name. Okay, earth cue. So it looks like there was a limiter or something pushed pretty hard in the earth cue. The instrumentation is, I don't know if it's just the mix, but a bit large for the earth cue. Again, think more smaller handheld instrumentation, individual brass or woodwinds instead of an ensemble. Feels like a choir. Choir and some brass in there. A little percussion would also help. The ostinato strings and the tubular bells work. Something dropped out. Oh, cover that gap. Cover that gap, whatever that was. It seems to stop suddenly. But overall, works well for a bit of danger and stealth. Fire cue. Bigger percussion. Watch out for reused instrumentation, strings. I think I hear choirs in multiple cues, the glockenspiel in multiple cues. really, if you have too many string layers, too many choir layers, it just gets to, when you put them all together, it gets to be such a big, thick mess that it becomes hard to identify individual lines. And it could very well be the mix, too, that if you brought things back, that it would give room for a lot of the layers. Because what you're doing there with all the instrument parts, individually, they seem to be enough on their own. But let's see what happens when we bring all these together. There's just too much in that low mid-range instrumentation, that too much sustain, more staccato lines in there will help to thin that out, because I think compositionally what you have there works. I think it is more your instrumentation, your orchestration of it that could improve. Earth loop. Great guitar line, flute line, percussion in there. Sounds like real guitar, that always helps. There's a bit of kind of a strong change in the velocity, it seems, of maybe the sample switching in the flute, because it seems to stick out a bit more in some parts than some of the smaller notes overall, but that's a pretty small point. Wind cue. Some woodwinds. Plucked string. Pizzicato. Helps to kind of lighten up this cue. Good use of the staccato strings. Loops well. There's enough of attack and to the staccato lines that things should kind of fit well together and have enough room to play. Good stuff. Solid melody line, melodic line. Everything fits well together. The overall mix is going to need to come back a bit. Mostly just take what you have and trim it down a bit. But like I said, with the use of staccato and more of the sharper attacks of the instruments gives more room for things to play with still enough movement where it's not just stopping. So nice work. Everything fits together, loops well together. layers one another, layers against each cue well also. And we'll try our last one here. We got a piccolo, some percussion, guitar line. Cool. A good start. Strong harmonic progression and melodic line. I always suggest against constantly using tremolo. Tremolo should probably be, or is better used as an effect at certain times, kind of breathing in and out with a sustain. So use sustain lines more consistently throughout the cue, and then throw in the tremolo as embellishment on key moments. But the pizzicato strings work. A little tightening up with the quantization, just to make sure everything sits right in that pocket. Fire cue. So the percussion works, but the rest of the instrumentation seems a bit reserved. You got some choir in there, that can certainly sit in the background, but stronger brass, more present in the front, stronger string lines. Cool. The sort of mallet kind of sound in there. The little bit of percussion works well. The harp line, this works nicely. So again, each cue has its own solid place, works well against the other cues. I am kind of counting this, and I think this might suffer from the same 6/8 8-bar approach as the previous project. Let me count here. 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4. Yep, so I'm halfway through. So I would extend this out another 8 bars and just move the progression and the pattern in a new place. Everything fits nicely. Most of what we heard worked out quite well. That's certainly the most challenging aspect of this is finding a place for all of the instruments. If you are going to be using, if you're using 3 or 4 or 5 instruments per cue, and they are all in the same kind of tonal range, or they're all stronger sustained or more powerful sounds, or playing against smaller plucked instruments, you really have to find the different combinations of instruments that work. And we saw a variety of approaches, some good ideas there, so it hopefully might inspire a direction for you to go in the revision. So again, as we go into week 4, if you have any questions on any of the assignments from week 3, any of the revisions that I post up, or as you start working on your revisions, if you have any questions about feedback or grade sheets or completing the assignments or understanding the assignments or getting any sort of technical things worked out here in week 4, this is the time to make sure everything is working for you. Everything has been working for you throughout the month, and to figure everything else out that we need to finish out the class. So a couple of assignments for week 4 here to get us to the home stretch, or through the home stretch. And the first one is to finish out the sound design for Angry Bots. We have done the music and done revisions. And I have done graded your first round of week 1 revisions. And you have now submitted your second round of week 2 revisions. So I will be getting to that here through the end of the month. But we've done the music, but we need to finish out the sound effects. And the game has a very enjoyable array of sound effects. It's all robots and weapons and explosions and very interesting thing, robotic doors opening and closing. So all sorts of interesting sound design to be had. This game requires 22 sound effects to create, and there are certain combinations of sounds that you can find and kind of group together. So let me get the asset list here for this assignment. So here's the PDF that comes with the assignment. And again, we'll go through this process here in just a sec, but I would suggest that you throw in the original sound effects from the game and use those as a guide in the design of your own sounds. Screenshots and pictures of all the different sounds for this part of the game. And down here towards the bottom is the handy asset list for all of the different sounds that you will be creating. And again, everything will be 16-bit 441K stereo files. Follow the naming of the files, and some of them are indicated that they do loop. So I would suggest that you open Logic and you create a new session. Oh, let's see. I want to close. We're done with our review. And we'll create one track here. And you will go get the original sound effects from the game and use those as a guide as you build your own versions. So let me get some desktop real estate here. And find Angry Bots. Here's your copy of the game. And as you are probably quite familiar by now, you choose Show Package Contents. You right-click on the game application, and you choose Show Package Contents, which will give you a folder called Contents. In there, double-click on Contents. You will find Data. Inside of Data, you will find Streaming Assets. And inside of Streaming Assets, you will now find a sound effects folder. Just in the same way that you did this for 2D Platformer, I'm going to take all of these sound effects, highlight all of them, and just drag them into a track. And we want to place all of the files onto one track. And here you have your guide track. Sound effects, guide. Right? These are the original sound effects. Now, of course, when you bounce this, you want to mute it out so you don't actually end up using any of these sounds, but you will use them as a guide for your own design. So you will create a couple of tracks down below. Maybe call this edit 1, edit 2, edit 3, edit 4, edit 5, and start building your own sound effects. So let's take a listen to what these sound like. And I'm going to do that from here, actually. Just so we can see what the file names are, and I can quickly play the different sounds. All right, let's see. I think I have to set something up here. Check. All right. Now, I don't know how loud these are going to be. I don't know if I have control over that. Hold on. I will go here. And try turning it down here. See if this makes any difference. Okay. So when you start creating these sounds, I would suggest that you find groups of similar types of sounds and go search out a whole bunch of sound effects all at one time. Then bring back the group of sound effects, edit them, and then start building them into the finished sound effects that you want to use. I wouldn't suggest, do not go, okay, first sound is airlock door close. And then you go and search for airlock door closing sounds and you edit them and you finalize them and you bounce them out and you say, okay, done, check. Next, sound effects, airlock door open. And then you go find a sound effect for airlock door open and you bring it back in, you edit it and you finalize it and you bounce it out. Don't go sound effect by sound effect. Find groups of things that are similar. So there are a lot of doors in this game and there are a lot of explosions in this game. So there's sound effect, there's airlock door open and close. There's interior door open and close. There is locked door open. So I would go find, these are like kind of Star Trek doors, the big ones, the circular ones that open in the game, and the Star Trek doors that open and close. So sometimes you can get away. Here, let's do airlock door open or close. Open. Airlock door close. Sometimes you can get away with just reversing the sound for the open or close. Sometimes like you might add a little click at the end, so when it is closed, here's interior door open. So whether it is mechanical, I've heard hydraulic, pneumatic, electric kind of door sounds that make it sound interesting. There are two ambiences. There's the exterior when it starts, the rain sound. There's the interior hum sound. Makes it sound like the inside of a spaceship or something. Those are long looping files. This is what I mean about going in here and looking at the original files. Right? These two are the longest files of the whole bunch. So they don't have to be exactly the same length, but give them enough time so that you don't hear the same rain drips over and over and over again. Okay, so then the other thing that there's quite a number of are explosions. Each robot, when it is destroyed, when you defeat it, it explodes. So there is flying buzzer destroyed explosion, patrol mech destroyed explosion, spider destroyed explosion, and the spider, you can shoot it and blow it up, or it can, if it gets close enough, it'll self-destruct. So there's another one. There's 4 of those. There's also missile explosion. There's shoot missile, which is kind of in the same line of each one of them. So there's quite a bit of explosions. Go out and find a whole bunch of cool explosion sounds and then bring them back in and layer them and combine them and pitch them and do all sorts of fun stuff to build your explosions. And get enough source material that you know that you've got to generate 6 different explosion files. Here in the chat, what if we make the sounds like we did in your film class? Absolutely. You are definitely encouraged to make your own sounds. If you use them if you record any elements, if you use them from your own sound library, I recommend the Westar sound effects library, Westar Music sound effects library that has access to Sound Ideas and Hollywood Edge libraries. But whatever the source that you can find and use is all legit sources for your own custom sound design. Although I don't expect you to go like blow up your car or anything, like go set off a whole bunch of explosions, unless, well, if you have a big open area and lots of good recording gear, that might be a little bit different. But we used to do, well, in film and post classes, we've done car chase scenes. And we don't expect the students to go crash their cars in order to record some sounds, but exactly, all for authenticity. Whatever you have to do to capture the realistic sounds. What else do we have? There are alert sounds. The patrol mech, which is the big walking robot in the game, it has an alert sound when it finds you. Let me see. Let me continue playing these sounds. So here's flying buzzard destroyed explosion. And that was quite loud. At least on my end, it was quite loud. Zap Electric. This is the flying robot that you first encounter. It's got a lightning bolt that fires at you. There is the patrol mech alert sound. Very robotic, kind of senses you or notices you. Patrol mech destroyed explosion. This one is... Hold on. Check. Just want to turn these down because it's a very, very large explosion. Patrol mech footstep. This is when it is walking, left and right footsteps. Which I do not like the fact that they're the same one. But you can actually add 2 footsteps in there. Missile explosion. This is when it fires the missile at you. It doesn't hit you. I don't think it makes that sound when it hits you. I think it only makes it when it hits a wall. When it actually shoots the missile, that's like its weapon. The spider alert sound. Right, that's kind of when it wakes up and notices you. Spider destroyed explosion. This is when you destroy the robot. Spider proximity. This is a single beep that as the spider gets closer and closer to you, the beep speeds up. So if it's farther away, it goes beep, 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 gets closer and closer, it goes beep, 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 and gets really fast. But it does that repeating beep from code. Like the game does it. So all you need is a single beep. Very simple. I mean, all sorts of different ways you can make a beep. Spider self-destruct. If it gets close enough to you, beeps a whole bunch, then eventually it'll just blow up. I think that is a pretty horrible explosion sound. You can make something more interesting than that. We already did the doors opening and closing. Locked door opening. There in the game, there are different terminals that you hack. Terminal hack. almost like the computer opening up. I've heard some people do some cool stuff with actual voices. It says terminal hacked. But once once you hack the terminal, you can then go walk next to the door and open the door. Those are kind of like checkpoints in the game that you have to keep going past. That's a pretty boring door open sound also, but it can work. Player hit. This is when you are something causes damage to you. Player shooting. That is the weapon sound of the gun being fired in the game, which is this right here. Loop. Turn it down. All right. I would suggest that you follow this pretty closely with your own waveform. Just chop out a bullet shot and repeat it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I would repeat it 12 times and have it loop perfectly in the file, because I think that matches up with the muzzle flash animation in the game. As you watch, as you fire in the game, notice that there's a muzzle flash at the end. It lights up probably very closely in time with these bullet shots. So you're probably best served to time it out something like this and make it a loop and make it seamless. Okay. Those are all the sounds. So again, I would suggest you might even just spend a night just going and finding sounds. Find a whole bunch of different cool stuff to work with. I talk about the process of creating contact instruments. I'm a huge fan of doing sound design using Contact. But however you build your sounds, edit them, format them, use the session as a guide for all of your sounds, the length, how loud they are, what they sound like. Obviously, you're probably going to be good to kind of drag these out a bit so they're not like sitting right on top of each other, and just build your own sounds right below, then mute them out and bounce your sounds one at a time. That should get you going for your technical assignment this week. And then the only thing that is left is your final delivery of all of your files. So as I mentioned earlier, you now will have 3 different working games with your music and sound effects, custom music and sound effects, working as the soundtrack. There are different technical hurdles that you might encounter with people actually playing the games, meaning that these are Mac applications. You can zip them up. You can put them on your website. You can put them on Dropbox. You can share them around. You can email them. You can put them on a portfolio or a demo reel and put them on a website and have people download them. And that's perfectly legit. The problem with that is that a lot of folks don't, and wisely, don't want to download random files off the internet and play them. Even though it's a Mac application, and that's, I guess, a bit safer overall, you would be very smart not to just randomly download stuff, and especially applications, and play them on your computer. But let's assume that this is a prospective client or an employer that wants to look at a demo of your work. The best way of showing your music in a game is to show it actually working in the game. So you could send them the application, but again, there's technical hurdles involved in that. Number one, they have to have a Mac computer to play the game. It's just a Mac application. Their computer has to be powerful enough to play the game, which is, the games are not really all that taxing on a computer, so you could probably get away with that. Then the game has to work on their computer because of software and operating system and just all sorts of different factors about their individual computer. It has to work, but more than likely that also will work. typically you're sending these games to beyond your friends and family. It's you're sending them off to employers or clients that are probably gamer, techie, nerdy folks that understand if their games work and how they play and all that sort of stuff. So, um, even though they're roadblocks, I mean, they are real, right? If they don't have a Mac computer, they can't play the Mac application. But they're certainly not beyond the possibility that somebody could actually download this application and play it and check it out. But you want to make it as effortless as possible. You want everybody to be able to see your work. You don't want them to actually download and play the game, and for some reason they hate how the game plays or they can't figure it out or something, and they get mad and they blame your music for some reason. So you want a very well-controlled demo of your music and your sound effects. And creating video captures of that is going to be the best way. A video is probably going to last a longer amount of time than a particular demo that you might have or an application. So having a video capture that you can share around, you can put it in an email. People feel no issue about clicking on a YouTube link and watching a video. So having a video representation is a good extra piece of material to have that you can share around to clients and employers. And then if they want more information or they actually want to check it out and that they have a Mac computer and everything's good, here's the actual zip file. Download the application and have some fun. So for this final assignment, you will just be creating your one last round of video captures of your games with any revised music that you've created, all of the sound effects for 2D platformer and Angry Birds, Angry Bots, and the music for Palace of Renthalion. You'll create one more video capture of each one of those, post it up on YouTube or host it on YouTube so that you can share it. Then the assignment is actually a discussion post for everybody, so that you'll share it around to the class. Everybody gets to see everybody else's final versions of the class projects, share and discuss, and then you also have the video for your own demo reel. Really the focus of the assignments. The assignments are all well and good as learning material for the class and the games and whatnot, but really they're there for demo reel material. They're there to build out a portfolio as you get into your last rounds of classes here. All of your classes in these final couple of months have you creating projects that hopefully you can put into a format that you can show off. You should be building a resume. You should be building a website, a blog, a portfolio website with links to SoundCloud music and YouTube video links, downloads, pictures, anything that you can use to share what you are doing. And one of the nice things, by the nature of an online degree class program, you are doing this. You're kind of forced into this. The way we communicate in the online degree program is through the internet and using all of the tools to share media and communicate and research and all of those tools that you've been using through this entire program can and should be used to your benefit going forward in the class. So as you progress, if you have any questions on the assignments for this week, you will finish out your revisions for the Palace of Renthalion. I will hopefully have the grades back to you either tomorrow, Wednesday evening, or by Thursday, certainly. Then I will grade out week 2 revisions. You will hand me in week 4 assignments by the end of the week, and that should take us all the way through to the end. So I'll stick around here for a couple of minutes after class. If you have any questions, you want to discuss anything, or you catch it on the archive and send me an email, send me a message, and we can find a time to set up a voice chat or discuss anything that we need. So, but now's the time to do it. Here it is in week 4, beginning of week 4. Contact me as soon as possible, and we can figure out anything that we need to figure out. So, other than that, let's wrap it up here, and we'll meet again on Thursday. All right. Have a good afternoon, and I will see you then. Thanks a lot.